So Beltane. Beltane is mid-spring, the height of spring, with the very first signs of summer approaching. And I got so excited the last few days because those first signs of summer are here. Saw my first fireflies and plants that, jewelweed just emerging, the poison ivy turning very, very red at this time of year. And nettles being at its peak, peak harvest time. Nettles is traditionally a Beltane plant, which I think is really applicable for what we're going to talk about as far as the two energies um, of our essence and our sexuality. Nettles having both extreme amounts of nourishment, so nourishing, and also this feisty, fiery burn that it can deliver. So yes, we've moved past the equinox, we're past the state of equilibrium, and we're heading towards the real solar time of year where the sun is most powerful. So that solar energy is drawing us outward, just like it draws all the plants out. Things in here in North Carolina are just exploding everywhere, all kinds of plants and leaves. So everything's really getting drawn out by the sun. And so likewise, our energy, our creative energy, our sexual energy is all being drawn outwards and into relationship with the people and the things around us. So I really want to focus on this expression of ourselves because this time of year really is about that. We'll definitely be looking at our inner world, but it's looking at how we express. How do we relate to others and how do we express ourselves? So actual Beltane is next week, next Tuesday, when the full moon will be in Scorpio. And Scorpio is the sign of life and death and sexuality and of creation itself. So obviously, creation being the life-death cycle, that's what Scorpio is about. And since we're in the middle of spring, it's about birth and life, where Samhain will be new moon in Scorpio, and that's the time of looking at death. So we're here looking at life and sexuality. Our sexual essence is the very same thing as our divine essence. And I'll probably repeat this several times because there's been so many messages contrary to that. However, Scorpio itself represents both because they are interchangeable, really. Life and death, life and birth are brought forth from sexuality, and creation brings about life and death. It's all the same thing. There's an enormous amount of messages that our sexuality is something to be ashamed of. And it is a travesty. It's an absolute tragic travesty that there's been so much success around this message of sexuality being shameful, to convince people that the part of themselves that is most precious, that is most like the divine, right? This sexual energy gives us the power to create new humans. It's the closest thing that we can be to the Creator. And it's the same thing as our creative essence. It's the same thing as our life force, which heals. The idea of putting something so natural and so beautiful into a place of shame is tragic. Okay, so the mandorla, this thing, this symbol that some of you have drawn. If you haven't drawn it, I recommend that you do if you wish. This is the mandorla, the name for my website, and it is said to be the most ancient symbol for life on Earth, humans' most ancient symbol for creation. And this big circle being all that exists, everything. And the two interlocking circles, the top one being the masculine energy and the bottom being the feminine energy. These two things are in direct magnetic opposition to each other, and this is really just a whole lot about magnetics. And many quantum physicists don't believe in matter at all. They don't believe we are matter. We're just magnetics. We're electricity. So this is an electrical concept and a magnetic concept. These two polar opposites are completely attracted to each other. And when they merge, when they overlap, that is the source of creation. All things are created in this way on Earth, so they say. And the mandorla is an Italian word for almond, and it refers to the overlap. This shape in the middle, that's the almond shape. So our own sexuality, divine essence, life force, all has these two opposing forces of the masculine and feminine. And the masculine being loosely attributed to spirit and mind, to air and fire, and the feminine being attributed to physicality, to matter. Even if we're not really made of matter, it feels like we are. You can touch. So the feminine being the physical, the water and earth. And the feminine is nurturing, fluid, sensitive. It yields, especially in sexuality, but energetically as well. It's the yielding. It's a negative magnetic charge. And the masculine is a wilder, more fiery nature and of freedom and expansion. So it has that positive charge. So within all of us and within our sexuality, there are these two sides, the nurturing, sweet, surrender side and the fiery, primal, wild side. And in most of the women that I've worked with, and men, that there's often one side that feels stronger than the other. For women, it tends to be the nurturing side comes easier because that idea of women is where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be nurturing and sweet and yielding and surrender, so that can come easier for some. But on the other hand, that's not the case. The fiery, wild side comes easier for other women. So we're going to look at that today, of those two aspects, because when we bring them into the best balance with each other that we can, then we have more, there's more in the overlap. When these get so full up of good stuff, they both have more and more charge, more can be created, more can be healed, and we can just enjoy life more and have more pleasure. The opposite of our sexual essence, life force, is shame. And shame being the most destructive energy within us that there is. Okay, so in belly dance, we can move We use the movements to activate both sides of us, that sweet, go with the flow, nurturing side and the feisty, wild side. By dancing those different kinds of movements, it activates that energy within us. We're acting it out. We are enacting it. So just in doing that alone, we charge up the life force and we can heal some old shame and hurt without even thinking about it. And moving on both sides of the spectrum can help us to become more comfortable with both aspects. And I've heard this a lot from women of whichever it is, that dancing in a real slow, sensual way, that women, by dancing it, were then able to sexually express themselves in that way. And likewise on the other thing, being real sassy and feisty with shimmies and accents has helped to spark that in their sexual relationships. And yes, in this mandorla too, right there in the middle, the more we have coming from both sides, clear and bright and strong, more pleasure in the middle. And pleasure is the thing that heals shame more than anything. It's the most potent medicine for dissolving shame. It's pretty basic. It's one of those very simple, very complex. We don't have to worry about the complexities. We can focus on how simple it is. And aim to strengthen both sides and use the dance to learn about ourselves, use the dance to strengthen and get to a more vibrant, more pleasurable life. One little side note, I'm not going to get too much into this, but I wanted to note that one of the sources for the origination of belly dance, the movements, were taken from movements that women did and men did in lovemaking, that movements that naturally came for birth as well, for labor as well, which, by the way, sexuality and birth are very, very related. They're very closely linked. I have a lot of pregnant women who sort of feel like their sexuality is like they've separated from sexuality when they became pregnant, and nothing could be less true. You're at your most vibrant sexually, and there's a very direct link between sex and birth. So the movements for belly dance came from both, and all the movements that we've learned in class, every single one, can be applied to lovemaking, whether it is lovemaking with a partner or lovemaking with yourself. All of those movements can be done. And the how we've been using the movements to create particular effects in our body, that also applies to lovemaking. Good.